Back when Braid came out, there certainly had been independent games that people were paying attention to before that. But sort of that year, 2008, saw a number of indie games that all came in the same year, that were all kind of at the same level of seriousness. And by that I don't mean like serious work of a game, but like that these are no longer like tiny games that you just kind of like, oh, it's some kid doing something cute, right? It's like, actually, there's enough meat here to this game that you might care about this as much as you care about a AAA retail game, right? So games that came out that year, N+, Castle Crashers, you know, Braid, World of Goo, and that really changed the climate around what indie games are and how much they're worth paying attention to, you know, and so maybe now in 2012, you know, indie games come out and people really come to them with the expectation that they're worth paying attention to and will notice more about them. It's a common thing among game designers, especially these days, to get into discussions about fun, right? And they're difficult discussions to have because fun is a very amorphous word. Like, what it means to you may not even be the same thing that it means to me. An example that I bring up all the time, a much older game, right? I used to play Counter-Strike quite a lot. I might offhandedly say that's a really fun game and that's why I play it, but it is not a fun game. It's a grueling, punishing, brutal game. Yeah, I don't like to use the word fun too much to describe what I try to do. I appreciate it if players find a game that I make enjoyable, right? And hopefully it is often, but it's usually not the point. So like, you know, as you said, Braid is not really a fun game for many people, probably most people. And it's not designed to be fun. You know, it's designed to be interesting and designed to provide the player with difficult mental challenges. To me, that's the meat of that game and what makes it different. And you could call that fun in the same way that Counter-Strike might be called fun, but that leads to discussions that are hard to have, I think. You know, in movies, we have all these different genres of movie, and when you go to a different genre of movie, you have different emotional expectations, right? They are still sort of this commercial experience in that you feel like, I paid to go see a comedy, so this better be funny. But that is not an expectation you would have going to see a drama or going to see a documentary or whatever, right? In games, we don't seem to have that, right? Like, everybody expects this fun thing out of all games. And maybe we just, you know, right now our genres are more along mechanical lines rather than emotional lines, right? So, you know, we have an RTS versus a first-person shooter, and maybe we ought to have a different categorization that's like fun game versus, you know, we would have to invent these category names, but like, I feel happy while I'm playing this, or I feel like I'm confronted with grueling choices while playing this, or I feel powerful while playing this versus I feel helpless and I'm always trying to scrabble along, right? Those are very different emotional places to play, and we're only just really getting started exploring those as game designers, and I think that there's a lot of interesting work to be done there in building these different things and seeing how people feel when they play them. So I don't play very many Japanese games anymore, but the reason is because I've concluded that I don't like modern Japanese games, you know? What I strive to do in my own games, which you can see pretty clearly in Braid and is carried over into The Witness, is to respect the player as an intelligent person who can figure things out and who wants to discover things or come to understand more things than they knew at the start of the game. I want to respect my player's time, so I don't want to give the player like a lot of filler just because I feel like gameplay ought to be 60 hours long, right? Most modern Japanese games that I play take the opposite stance completely, right? They take the stance that the player is afraid of your game, and if you're not very careful holding the player's hand through everything, then the player will run away or just won't be able to handle it. I don't think that that's an actual cultural difference, right? I think it's just You know, sometimes industries get an idea about the right way to make games and they sort of get the wrong idea. Like there's lots of things that Western game designers, industrial scale game designers like at EA or Activision or wherever, things about the way that they have concluded are the right way to design games that I think are totally wrong. And so this is like the Japanese version of that, right? They don't just give you a simple situation and let you work it out. They explicitly tell you what to do and then say, it's not hard, don't be worried, go ahead, you try now, you know? And then you try and you do it, and halfway, when you're in the middle of doing it, it stops you and it says, now remember, during the next part, you know, rotate the block to the right. Once you've done that, it eliminates the joy of discovery, which, as I've said, is something I really value. I really value that click that happens in your head between you see something and you don't quite understand it, and then suddenly you do understand it. And that is a fundamental part of human existence in the world, is that kind of mental growth, that kind of expanding my sphere of understanding the world around me. And when you build an entire game that's I tell you what to do and then you do it, okay, you're not going to lose the player, but you've prevented that player from having any joy of discovery at all. And I don't want to play games that are like that, you know. So as I said during the Indie Game the Movie panel though, right, not all Japanese games are like that. You could certainly find exceptions. There are some notable exceptions that came out recently. But when I think Japanese game, that's what I think. I feel like it's important to have these conversations. Like if our cultures have value to each other, part of that value is in communicating about what we perceive in the other culture, right? And it's easy to be too afraid of that. I don't know that the controversy ought to be the focus. I think that there's actually an interesting design discussion to be had there, and I would like for that to be the focus.